Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another fantastic virtual tasting with Becker Vineyards. I'm Rebecca Nelson, the Wine Club Director here, welcoming you once again. We are finishing out week 18 now that we've been doing this. And tonight we have a brand new release wine. This is our 2018 Petite Sirah Reserve. Very, very dark, very deep purple in color. This is just one of those absolutely fabulous wines that Jon has produced many years in a row now. I'm really excited for everybody to get to try this one. Tonight with us, we of course have Jon Leahy, our winemaker. We also have both Dr. Richard Becker and Dr. Joseph Becker with us. And we have our general manager, Bret Perrenoud. So I'm gonna turn it over to the guys to get everybody started. I hope you all enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thank you again, and hope to see you on the flip side. So, Doc, Joe, would you all like to lead us off with a few words, please?
The words that I have are just, looking at some of the worst numbers that anyone can imagine, both on the side of our economy and our GDP down 10% in one day, just unbelievable, and our terrible number of cases and hospitalizations from the virus. Maybe a little bit of a plateauing in Texas, we're hoping, in the last few days. But again, this is our tribute to all the people that are doing all they can to support their friends and keep us all afloat and have a few moments to think about something wonderful like some wine. So that's my vote. Joe, you?
I always being able to enjoy being able to do this with my oldest brother. I mean, I'm sorry, sorry, Dad.
That's me.
I know. I think Doc looks a little better than Will right now.
It could be.
Yeah, well, trapped out on the island, for the summer. Well, guys, thank you. And I want to kind of dive right in. Bret, are you still there? Oh, I think he's. I think it's just the two of us. So great, we can hog all the screen time. We don't have to share. So as people join us, I want to remind everybody, please type in your questions. I don't think I was told that I need to say that at the beginning for everyone as they get in. So if you have not yet, pour yourself a glass of this wonderful 2018 Petite Sirah. Give it a swirl, a sniff, and a taste. And I think we're going to dive right in to it. We were just talking before we went on broadcast. The nose on this thing is just incredible. It just keeps coming and coming and coming. And I did not, normally I would decant. I did not decant this tonight. I literally forgot about the decanter, grabbed the bottle, opened it, and brought it down here to the studio, and forgot the decanter. And I was like, well, it's opening up nicely. So, Joe, what are you getting on the nose?
I'm getting a beautiful, for red wine, almost kind of a floral note, and even maybe, maybe raspberry, but just a really beautiful nose. You're absolutely right.
Doc, how about you?
John, I'm beginning to think we can make wine in Texas. This is stellar. Amazing raspberry for me, and wonderful tannic structure. Before we went on the air, I asked you what is this wine? This is not the way I expect Petite Sirah to taste. And I think part of it is we're able to get our fruit very ripe here. I think this is an example of it. And then we have these really ripe fruit notes and these really rich tannins, and it's like it's another beverage.
It's interesting because it is a little different than the previous blend put together on the Petite Sirah. Technically, it is 95% Petite Sirah, but 10% of that Petite Sirah came from True Talent's vineyard, or 10% of the overall blend. So, it's 85% our Petite Sirah, 10% Drew's, and then there's 5% farmhouse Counois in there. And again, choosing that Counois to go in there because of the carrier note that Counois has. It accentuates the natural perfume in the Petite Sirah. There's in this perfume, I get not just the red fruit, but I'm also getting violet in there.
Yeah.
Violets, and it's specifically wood violets. I mean, and I know this is going to make people roll their eyes and and harumph. That's the violet that they use in traditional French perfume and the French candies. Those violet candies that you get, those hard candies. That's what this nose reminds me of.
I think you're exactly right. Spot on.
Brett,
Yeah.
do you have that wine in front of you?
Yes, I have it.
Yes.
So what's your impression?
I think what's interesting to me when I taste it is how it starts and it's so big and bold, and then it kind of those floral notes kind of come out at the end.
Mhm.
And after I breathe out, I'm getting a lot of like great flavors on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it unique to me is that it is a 1 through 6 full taste.
Right.
And it changes like 2 times in that taste. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree everything except right at the beginning. I don't get a full 1. I get about 2 through 6.
mhm.
That 1 just hits and then all of a sudden it explodes in. There's that little bit of a delay for me.
And everybody needs to know that that's our way we talk to each other when we're doing tastings.
If you're curious, yeah, so I grade wines 1 through 6. The 1 and 2 are the front of the palate. 3 and 4 are the mid palate. 5 and 6 are the finish or the back palate. So it's a very helpful way of describing wines so that we're all on the same page when we're discussing them during our Saturday previews. So, Doc, what do you get in the mouth in the finish, the retronasal? And would you explain that to people too? Because we've never touched on that on one of these, I don't think.
Not for a while, but so retronasal is the technique for professional wine tasters. People that are at a wine competition, they have to taste 200 wines. And the trick is understanding that we can only taste sweet, sour, bitter, salt, and maybe a little bit of umami, maybe that particular spice. But what we really think we're tasting is what we're smelling, and we can smell hundreds of things, and we're able to separate them out. So the retronasal technique is to first inhale the wine, and the trick is not to really sniff, but to smell it very gently, as if you were thinking you might smell something would be offensive. What's the most gentle inhalation you can make? And then if you do that, if you don't make too much of this past your olfactory receptors, then you take some into your mouth, you swallow it, and after you've swallowed, you exhale through your nose, and that's the retronasal. And that gives the most intense focus of the flavors and the characteristics of the tasting.
Thank you for explaining that. I always thought that was something from your fraternity days.
I know. Well, those were beer things. I mean,
With the funnel, Joe, and you're on the top.
my son Will did a lot of that, but
Right?
this was that should make Will feel better, I'm hoping.
Oh,
So John, one of the funny things that for as long as we've talked about 1 through 6, when you described where you thought 6 ended, it was like I'm about 3 seconds past your definition of where I tell you where 6 is.
right.
On our finishing taste, it's like after I take the breath, like Doc was saying, and completely exhale, and then take another breath, and then I was like, when it finishes, that's where I was at 6 until a couple weeks ago I found out I was way too late.
Well, but that's a fair point. Back to that though, Brett. I mean, with that retronasal, you really do. That's when that's completely finished. How it finishes out. That retronasal is pretty important if you want to complete through the whole thing. And I think most of us actually do it subconsciously. When we're out wine tasting, because you take that sip and then you just kind of exhale a little bit, and then you're like, oh, hey, this is actually staying with me.
Right.
But if you do it on purpose, like Doc described, it really can help really kind of drill down into the flavors that you're getting in that wine, which I'm just sitting here kind of enamored with this. I have not had this wine since we bottled it last spring. We're just now releasing it. So again, everybody, if you're tasting with us, you're the first folks to do so. That is something else on there.
I said, John, the richness, the depth, and the complexity is really striking me with this wine, as it did with the Dolcettos.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a nice unexpected experience.
Well, I'm really liking the fact that I keep smelling, because it's now at what is room temperature. It's not no longer at serving temperature for me. I'm expecting the alcohol to come forward, and it's not. And
It's not at all. No,
it's 14.4% alcohol, and so
it's not bad.
it's not coming. It's not volatilizing out like I thought it would. But the tannin structure in this wine is something else. So,
And John, what strikes me is the fruit extraction that you got from these 18 that really creates this beautiful wine.
yeah, so we had we took a whole bunch of people, and we started smashing each individual grape by hand like this and rubbing it down in the yeah, well, as ripe a year as 17 was, and we love to use that as the pinnacle year in this decade, this past decade. And I really do think it was the pinnacle year of that decade. 18, there were some really good follow-ups to that. Our Petite Sirah was one of them. And I want Bret, because this is one of his babies, going back to how the pruning has changed since 2010 forward. Do you want to explain a little bit about the Petite Sirah, Bret, and the vineyard?
Yeah, so when you guys come to the winery and pull down the front driveway, the first grapes you come to when you see grapes is the old Sauvignon Blanc. And then when you turn down Becker Farms Road to come to the winery, everything in that right side for a good while is this Petite Sirah. We planted Viognier in that block in 2001, and it got Pierce's disease and quickly pulled it out and put Petite Sirah back in there. But we changed the way we prune this, I guess, probably around maybe a year before John came, and took it off the cane pruning and put it on a modified cordon pruning and reduced the crop load, but it still wanted to make a lot of grapes. And I think that part of that's, this, and I want to also mention, John, that I think that extraction that we're getting on a lot of this stuff is due to the fact that we bought that fancy new press that everybody smiles about. Yep. And it does such a great job. And I think that it's getting like, that's one of the, it's like this, people always ask me, how does this wine come together? And I'm like, there's 25, arms coming into this that have to work. And I think all that is part of that. So.
Yeah, it really is. That press is amazing, and it allows me to really control down too. You were asking earlier off camera, Joe and Doc, about what was going on at the winery today, and to let folks know we are prepping for our second harvest on Monday. So we'll be harvesting the Malbec from our front vineyard, and we had the press check going on, everything getting everything ready again. So we had the kind of the early season dry run on the press with the Sauvignon Blanc. But I really want to make sure that as the reds come in and ferment, we're gonna, if we get it in on Monday, halfway through the following week, it may be ready to press. So that's where the differences are made. And I agree.
Brent, on that front vineyard where the Petite Sirah is planted, has even more history. The first thing planted there was Chardonnay. And that Chardonnay was spectacular, and it won a gold medal in the Dallas Morning News competition. And I remember, to my amazement, I didn't think you could really make great Chardonnay in this part of the world. And that was one of the first times that happened. And then Jerry Parsons found a red bluebonnet, and we planted that vineyard after the Chardonnay didn't survive the Pierce's attack. We planted red bluebonnets there, and we harvested. Jerry harvested those for seeds, partly with Wild Seed Farms, John Thomas. But it's had a lot of very interesting, successful things, except for the Viognier planted it, and now this. So,
except for the Viognier.
I thought possibly that Bret's beard might be blonde today because of all that he did a fabulous job with Clorox in our vineyard yesterday. But did you dye it, or is
when I got home, my beard looked like John's.
Yeah,
but no, I was wearing a face covering, so that's why I don't have a blonde beard.
So I got a couple of questions before I get lost on them. So the first question was, what the person had read that Petite Sirah tends to lose a lot of fruit as it ages in the first 7 years. I have not read that, and I'm not sure what that's referencing, but their concern was, would this age? And I do believe so, because our previous Petite Sirahs all the way back to 14 are tasting very nicely. So they're aging well. I don't expect any real huge amount of color drop or tannin malformation on this as it ages. So
I don't either. No.
so I think it's well. The other one, somebody asked, because we were talking about the press, what kind of press it is. It is a bladder press. It is not a basket press. It is a horizontal bladder press, but the bladder goes about 90% of the circumference. So all the grapes get pressed into the middle, and there are juice channels in the 4 juice channels down the center of that press where the juice goes through and then channels out to the bottom where we collect it. So
I say it's $170,000 worth of awesomeness. The way that it works.
Let me just tell you, having John been asked by one of your predecessors to do a hand press with that older thing sitting out in front of the winery. We've really come a long ways from there.
Well, that's good because you basket
That's good. Yeah.
control the pressure on the fruit in the middle of that basket press. And this is where the evenness of this bladder press comes through. If it's at a half a bar, the entire volume is at 1/2 bar, or 7.5 pounds of pressure. That in a basket press, you may be breaking down on the top and it's saying a bar, but in the center of that, it could be almost 1.5 bars to 2 bars. So you're going to be extracting a lot of bitter phenolics off of a basket press. I do not enjoy basket press quite frankly. So that's just my personal prejudice. So back to the wine. So we got to get going through this before I get sidetracked again. Brett's wiggled eyebrow.
No, you're good.
So on the blend we touched on earlier. So this is 95% Petite Sirah and 5% Coonois. And the Coonois, of course, came from Farmhouse Vineyards. That is our source of Coonois. The 85% of this came from the front vineyard, as we discussed. Back to your point, Brett, about the changing back and forth on there, because I remember, I think it was 2014 that Floyd and the guys had changed the pruning, and we found that we were getting a more consistent ripening.
Yeah, when we were cane pruning it, so for people who don't know, when you cordon prune, the arms are like my arms sitting here like this, but what was happening, we were cane pruning it where we were leaving 4 canes down, and all the growth was still coming out of the head for fruit. It wasn't coming out of the canes.
Right.
And so we tried like 5 things over the years to try to tie the canes down later, leave them up, do all this stuff, and it just wanted to grow out of the center. And so we kind of did it in a way that we didn't lose production, to where we did part of it in a certain method and see if that works. And then after we saw how good it worked, we kind of said, we're going to get it. And I think in 2015 was the first year that it was pretty much off of that modified cane pruning and strictly on cordon. And lo and behold, it made a wine that we made by itself. And I think that wasn't obviously when we make these wines, people will look at this and go, well, you had 85% from your estate vineyard. Why was it not estate bottled? And the answer is when we tried it, we liked it better with these other components in there. Right. And one question that I had is, I don't remember why we put Coonois in it. I think I know, but I forgot it was in here. But obviously when we did our tasting, it needed something, right?
So we put Coonois on there because I needed to make sure that my reputation for making weird ass blends was intact.
John,
I don't think. Yeah.
So I have a question for you guys before we dive into the barrel program. Another question from Facebook. What do you attribute the fact that Petite Sirah is not more widely planted in Texas? So I want to hear Doc and Joe and Brett. I want you all three to kind of chime in a little bit about this. So Doc, would you lead that off? Why do you think it's not more widely planted?
Well, it certainly doesn't have a natural following, but in the market, I guess that's the real issue, but it should be. But I think people just have that. It's being discovered, Brett, don't you think? I think we're seeing more planted, and I think it's with the kind of the emergence of Tannat. I think this is kind of a softer cousin of Tannat, and is great by itself and a great blending grape. That's what I think. Joe, do you?
No, I think, as somebody said the other night, this is the pairing for this is another glass of it.
Right. Well, and back on point on the question is, why isn't, it has been discovered now, but why not more? I know Drew does. I know Farmhouse has some. of course, and thank you, Katie Jane, for never selling us any of that. We really appreciate it.
Well, I think the other point too is that we're always looking for the right grapes to grow in our climate, and I think this is one that we're starting to learn about, one that has a very nice tannin structure. And I think it's a pretty young varietal in Texas.
It is. So, Brett, any thoughts on why you don't think it's more widely spread? Is it difficult to farm?
Yes, no, everything's difficult to farm, but I think that, probably like Doc was saying, as far as how many people have had a straight Petite Sirah, and how, a lot of times when you get them, they're really tannic and they're kind of overblown. At least the ones that I've had, they get really wonky really quick, but it's just not something that you're going to go up to a wine buyer and say, when's the last time you bought a good Petite Sirah by itself? And really, we made this, as like Doc was saying, maybe as a blender, and as we taste it through the barrel program, it just kind of made itself be what it is at our particular place. But this is the one at our place that's also referred to the cowbell, right? It goes in a lot of things. It goes in almost everything. So one of the things that we always have to remind Doc is that we're completely out of Petite Sirah. We can't add any more to anything else at the winery because we're out.
Right.
So we could use a lot more of this.
Grenache. Drink Grenache.
Yeah.
Brett, I mean,
I've been working on it.
I know. Petite Verdot.
Yeah.
Well, I think Petite Sirah is being discovered. You're right. Quite frankly, I think it's one of those varietals a lot of people overlook in favor of some sexier headline type varietals. But there are quite a few examples of good Petite Sirah out there, and back to Drew's, because that 10% of this is Drew Talent's Petite Sirah, and he does not produce as much in any given year as we do. I don't think. I mean, it's pretty close, but equally fantastic grape. The concentration off of his vineyard is absolutely fantastic.
But would it be a fair assessment that our Petite Sirah or the Petite Sirah could possibly be in 80% of our wines? John, no.
Possibly.
60. Even just 5 gallons.
Yeah, right. A little drop here, a little drop there. It's kind of like it needs a little more salt.
So, John, but a question I had for you, you've been all over the wine world. Where would you get a glass like this? Where else in the world would you have a glass like this?
Well,
that you
call it de Reef, we might be able to find it in France, but from Petite Sirah like this, is this as concentrated as this? I don't know. I've had one that's been pretty close, and it was from one small producer, and I don't know if he's still doing it. Vincent Arroyo was a grape grower, and he really did that. And our friend Corey Beck used to Petite Sirah. His grandfather actually did a lot of those plantings and stuff for Chateau Montelena and earlier. But Petite Sirah that Corey used to produce up into the mid 2000s or early 2010s, they were good. But I really do think they were damn good. But I really do think this is a little more concentrated.
John, doesn't Bogle make sort of a very economic, very good Petite Sirah?
So Bogle did, and Mr. Bogle passed away several years ago, and it was very, very sad when he did, because his family's a wonderful family. The whole family is still there, and they're still doing it, but he really led that charge. And Bogle did come out with one of the very first commercially single vineyard labeled Petite Sirahs I saw readily available in wine shops throughout California. I mean, it was a commercial product for him, and it was damn tasty, and it was not expensive. It was kind of eye-opening that Petite Sirah was this wonderful wine, and I think that helped a lot of people on the West Coast discover Petite Sirah and start planting it. They really did lead the charge, yes. But again, back to Doc's premise, yeah, I'm going to err on your side on this one, Doc, and say, yeah, we are producing a rather concentrated example of that. I really enjoy it. So do you always make a reserve and regular release each year? Not on the Petite Sirah, we don't. The Petite Sirah is a reserve or winery only wine. However, we do use some of the Petite Sirah. I think about 25% of the Petite Sirah we produce actually ends up being blended with several other blends in there. So we don't produce a lot. And each year there have been years where I didn't have enough because I used it in blending, and I was like, oh crap, I can't make a single bottle. So but we've been our production has been pretty consistent over the last several years to allow us to do that.
Well,
All right,
Brett, Brett, when I turning into the winery the other day and driving past the Petite Sirah, the fruit set looked really good. How is it looking to you this year for production?
I think we're there. It might be a little heavy. I think it was a little active. It might have been a little more than it wanted to be. But again, we were watching that on kind of the ripening curve. It's moving, it's getting ripe. And, you know, in previous years, we picked this for the wine club hands-on harvest day. But I think that it could have a little more canopy, maybe. It's had a hard time with the heat, like everything else has. I was telling you guys the other day that when it doesn't rain, birds don't have anything to eat, so they find these little islands of vineyards, and they love to come in here and feast. And we have doves in the vineyard that are as fat as little Cornish game hens. But anyway, I think it looks. Yeah. So it'll September 1st when the season comes. It'll be a good. I think it's going to be a great year for Petite Sirah if we can get it ripe. And again, this is something that we kind of balance with how we're watering, and luckily, I think, you know, I'm in Fredericksburg. It was raining as I got here today, and we need those little rain showers come through at the right time, and I think we're in good shape. Good,
wonderful.
I agree. So real quick before we do our food pairings, touching briefly on the barrels, this program saw a vast majority of its oak was American. There was a little bit of French oak on the Counois, but of these two varietals, all of the new oak on our Petite Sirah was American oak on the 2018. So it was predominantly American oak. It's a great example of what you can do with American oak with a good varietal, I think, and we'll just sum it up there. But again, it was less than 20% new oak on there. So here comes the moment of truth. Who wants to lead off with their food pairing?
I do.
Okay.
So first off, my producer was here a few minutes ago sampling gummy bears with the Petite Sirah. And,
yes.
It's a natural.
Actually, the thought that I had sitting here tasting it is that my grandmother and my mother made an incredible pot roast that I think would pair very well with this.
Oh, you're absolutely right, especially with the right kind of meat, the little fattiness there, and that slow cook.
Yeah,
yes, it would pair well with that. Now you're talking real food. Now I'm starting. Thank you, Joe. Now I'm starting to get hungry. Doc, what do you think, sir?
Tom Perini's tenderloin.
Oh, you Brett. Yeah, Tom Perini's tenderloin. Yeah, if Tom's listening, take mercy, make more tenderloin. So Brett.
Well, Tom and Lisa this weekend are out with their great friends, Great Vineyard in Central Coast of California. So they may not be drinking Texas wine right now, but anyways, I thought.
Well, we feel sorry for them if they're not. We could always ship some to them if they need a safety line. You know, I would hate to deal with all that Central Coast plonk that they're drinking. So, so Brett, what would you pair, sir?
Well, since tenderloin got stolen, I'm going to switch to, you know, one of our great friends, Bobby Watson. I went over to his house one night, and he had another friend there named Rich Becker, which is really hard when Richard Becker was there, right? So Rich Becker had this great recipe for lamb kebabs that they grilled on and they marinated them. Yeah, marinated them in olive oil and rosemary and rock like a coarse salt. And he literally hit those on the grill, and like I was standing there, and I don't like lamb normally, but it was the best lamb chop I've ever had in my life, and that's what I'd go with on this right now.
So how did he marinate him again? And what did he do?
Olive oil, a little bit of salt, and rosemary sprigs, and he would buy them. He was buying those kebabs at Costco.
Yeah.
And he would take them home and put them in that gallon bag, and then let them sit there overnight, and then literally just throw them on the grill and flip them over, and it just made it amazing. It was an amazing bite. You know,
That sounds really good. Well,
Tell Rich Becker to send the recipe to Richard Becker. I'd like to work with him.
yeah.
Absolutely. That
I think that was also the night that I got in trouble by my wife for being at Bobby's house too late, and I told her I couldn't get home because the creek was up between our house.
And there wasn't a rainstorm.
Yeah, there was no rain.
right.
Hadn't rained in 3 weeks.
I've got rack of lamb in the freezer. I'm thinking, I got some local lamb. That might be good. So I I guess the pairing that I would choose for this, if it had to be something really like sit down nice, would be Osobuco. I think it would do very well. And I think
Oh man, it would be good. Yeah.
Well, in with the reduction. Otherwise, I've had this wine, previous vintages of this wine with pizza. And somebody asked earlier, would you pair this with a fattier dish? Yes, there's a lot of tannin in here. It can hold up to a lot of stuff. Really, if you're a cheesehead and you really want some cheese with this, you need to go with a softer cheese. Would do very, very well. Something with a heavy amount of cream richness or butter fat in it, I think would do very well. We did get a question about, do you ever let the public help out with harvest as volunteers? And the answer is no, we do not. You don't want to have to work with me in the middle of harvest the way I yell and scream and throw things.
We've done some wonderful hands-on harvests.
Yes.
I know, Brett, that was one of Brett's ideas with our wine club that, like we've got our Sangiovese that's coming soon.
Yeah, so that day we bring in, and I think Rebecca actually came to me and said, we'd like to have the wine club members come help. And I'm like, this is the craziest idea I've ever heard. People are going to cut their fingers off. They're going to get run over by a tractor. But that's
why we don't let John drive the tractor.
That's right. Yeah. So we've done that every year. But one of the reasons, there's been some crazy things that even happened with volunteerism and whether it's legal that you can come and do all that kind of stuff, and you have to pay people if they're there. But as far as when we harvest our grapes, we're using machine. We're using about another $200,000 bit of awesomeness when that machine goes and gently shakes the grapes off. And so that's why we really don't have the opportunity for people to come volunteer to harvest. And smaller producers do that, but when we're going through picking a 5 or 6 acre block and it starts at 1 o'clock in the morning and ends at 6 a.m., that's usually not the time that people want to be hanging out at the winery.
When we first started, we did hand harvesting before we had a harvester, and it was I'm sure most of our listeners know that in Texas, the grapes start to ferment on their own natural yeast after about 10 or 11 o'clock, especially in August. And in our part of the world, you'd have to get 40 or 50 people there at 5 in the morning to do it, and it was a challenge, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So to tell you that, it's like Joe had a clipboard with 40 names on it. And each time a person filled their bucket and dumped it in the larger container, they shouted out their name or their number. I guess number. Yeah. Joe wrote it down. So he was keeping records of all these grapes being told. And that went on for about 5 hours, I guess, roughly. Yeah.
So I got a quick question about would this pair with any plant-based diet or plant-based food dishes? And that's kind of an interesting question because we don't automatically go there with wine, especially when we're talking about heavier tannins. The one thing I can tell you would be it's called Kingston curry. So, and it's not very curry-like, but it's basically black beans and sweet potatoes that have been stewed very aromatically with a lot of aromatic herbs. But the sweet potato, the black bean in there with avocado and then served over rice. So with that fat, the key to pairing wines like this tannin-rich wine, the plant-based dish is fat, natural plant fats. Avocado go-to.
What about an eggplant parmesan?
Eggplant parmesan actually do very well, but again, your fat's coming from dairy.
Okay. And John, artichokes. Artichokes would be great with this, I think.
I agree. A really great dish is artichoke hearts and cipollini onions that have been seared and then braised with a really meaty fish like halibut. That would go very well with this. Okay, so somebody in this conversation is getting very hungry. They keep talking about food. So Bret, what do we have for next week? On our next week's
I call it week 19. We found some 2016 Saunier that's actually a library release. We don't have much rosé in the library, but I found some of that and pulled the cork, and it was actually amazingly good. I thought we're gonna have to limit the amount of this that we sell because of that one. And then the 2017 Carignan from the Ready Vineyards, which is the first release of that like varietal for us. It was part of our 17. I call them the 3 wines that started with the letter C with the Seascape label. And then the 2016 Culinaria, which is another library release that we found. And it's been amazing to me that we're on we're going to be into week 19, and I think we've only repeated 1 wine. And I've got at least 2 more weeks before we even have to dive big time into the cellar. So, stay tuned, I guess.
So the following week, not next week, but the week after, can we announce that yet?
Yeah, yes. All the Seigneur, the Jolies.
Right.
We're going to do the 2019, the 2018, and the 2017 Jolie. And then pending approval, the next week, I'd like to do the same flight of the Reserve Shards. So the Canada and the Talent Chardonnay program that goes, starting at 18 and working its way back.
So for those absolute red wine lovers, bear with us.
Yeah.
The wines too, and they deserve equal light of day.
If you want to do the red wines, then do a private virtual tasting, and we'll make that happen on a Tuesday or Thursday when we're not doing these. So
sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for this episode. I hope everybody that's enjoyed. One more swirl, snip, and taste for everyone. I hope your Friday is going well, and you have a wonderful weekend. We've gotten a little bit of rain. It's kind of exciting here. So,
and I think just to make one point, this is we've been doing this for a while, and I think that as long as we're all quarantined and we're going through all this together, we're going to try to be there for all of our extended family with a glass of wine. And it's going to require all of Bret's creativity, but we're going to try to be here for you guys every week.
You know what they say, Bret's full of it.
Cheers, man.
Cheers, everyone. Great weekend. Good wine, great health.
Thanks.
And apparently we're still going. So